workshop is all about using natural dyes. Now we like to use different types of natural dyes for fun projects around the ranch, like making tea towels for the kitchen or dyeing eggs around Easter. But historically, people have found dyes in nature for lots of things before there were dyes you could just go buy at the store. Plants and berries and all kinds of different things in nature give you different colors depending on how you use them. Some things you have to boil down, some things you can soak, but we're going to explore something called shibori dyeing today with indigo dye. And around Easter time, we love to use natural dyes to color our eggs. But girls, what do we have to do before we dye our eggs?
Hard boil them.
You got it. So we're gonna hard boil some eggs we get from the grocery store, as well as some of our farm fresh eggs, which are different colors like browns and greens already. We're gonna experiment with all kinds of different spices and berries and plants to see what color dyes give us the most vibrant or dark colors on our eggs. And then we're also gonna experiment with some textiles. So come along and let's get started.
Hey Ranch School, I'm going to teach you how to boil some eggs. First, you're going to boil enough water to cover your eggs. To boil your water, you're going to have to make sure you turn your stove on. Sometimes if you cover it up, it will boil faster. Now that the water is boiling, we can put our eggs in. Make sure you're really careful or the eggs will crack. I'm going to turn it down low and let these boil for 10 minutes. Now I'm going to turn the water off and put the eggs in cold water, very carefully. The cold water will stop them from cooking. When you boil your eggs at different times, your yolks get harder. These all look a little different. This one's 6 minutes, 7 minutes, 8 minutes, 9 minutes, 10 minutes, 11 minutes, 12 minutes, 13 minutes, 14 minutes, 15 minutes. My favorite is 15 minutes, except I don't like the yellow part. I challenge you, Ranch School. Let me see you make some more boiled eggs. I know you can do it.
So to start with our natural dyes, we're using red cabbage. Look at this beautiful purple, but they call it red cabbage. So for every 3 cups of this cabbage, we are going to add a quart of water, which is 4 cups, and 2 tablespoons of white vinegar. So what we do first is add the water to a pot, and I'm actually gonna double this. So that was 4 cups of water for a quart, and 2 tablespoons of white vinegar. So to double it, I'll do another 4 cups, or 1 quart of water, another 2 tablespoons of white vinegar, and this is kind of the ratio that you're going to use for most of your dyes. So I'm going to bring this to a boil, and then we're going to add 6 cups of purple cabbage. Now we're gonna try for a really orange color dye with onion skins. So these are yellow onions, and the onion skins, we really just want the outside coverings, the outside couple layers. This is great to do if you have onions that have kind of gone bad and that have sprouted. Save those onion skins in a bag because we're gonna need 4 cups of these onion skins for 1 batch. So this method uses a lot of onions. So I would suggest having something on the menu for dinner that's gonna use all of these nice peeled onions, because once you take the skin off, they're not gonna last as long. We like to make meat with onions. If we have leftover steak or hamburger, I just throw a bunch of yellow onions in a cast iron pan and add some meat to it. It's always delicious. So when you're cutting onions, what's released really wants to find moisture, and it goes to your eyes because your eyes are the most moist place nearby. But if you have a rag here, they will be attracted to this instead, and honestly, your eyes do not burn near as much. So we've got lots of white onions ready to cook something up for dinner tonight, and we have 4 cups of yellow onion skins, 4 cups of water, and 2 tablespoons of white vinegar brought to a boil. But first, I'm going to show you another pretty interesting way to dye an egg. If you get some skins that come out a bit whole, take your hard-boiled egg and wrap it in the onion skin. It helps sometimes if you have a rubber band to put around it. This one we're going to dye just like this, and check out the pattern that makes from sitting in the dye right with the onion skin on it. 1 quart water, 2 tablespoons white vinegar. All right, now that this is boiling, we're going to add our 4 cups of onion skins. And you really just want to get the dark parts. It's okay if some of the lighter onion gets in there, but this is what's going to give you your color. So make sure all of those onion skins get saturated, and we're going to let this simmer for at least 30 minutes before we put our eggs in. And all of these dyes, the longer you leave your eggs in the dyes, the more vibrant they're going to be. So I usually like to leave everything in overnight for really dark eggs, but if you want some lighter or pastel colored eggs, you might want to take them out of the dye after like 30 minutes. For some pinkish purple natural colored eggs, we are going to use red or purple beets. Now these, you know, have a strong color. They'll even dye your hand sometimes when you're cooking with them. But we're going to use 4 cups of chopped beets. And again, I'm going to get my water boiling. We're going to add 1 quart of water, 2 tablespoons of white vinegar. And while that's boiling, I'm going to chop my beets. And when you're chopping your beets, you're not doing it for cooking, so they don't really have to be uniform size. It's just nice to get them in smaller pieces so there's more surface area for that dye to soak out into your liquid. And you can use the ends, you just kind of want to cut off the parts that have a lot of dirt on them. You don't have to peel these beets. I gave them a good wash. There might be a little, residual dirt in your water, but it's no big deal. So that was just 2 large beets, and we ended up with 4 cups of chopped beets. So if you want to double the recipe, you'd probably need 4 large beets for 8 cups. And now that we've got the water boiling, we are going to dump these beets into the water. Careful not to splash yourself. And we're going to let this simmer for 30 minutes before we add our eggs. We had so much fun experimenting with all these egg dyes, and we really learned a lot. We did white eggs and brown eggs in most of the dyes. So our yellow onion peels were a total hit. These are really neat, and when you soak them with the onion peels, you get some really interesting designs. If you filter out the excess onion peels or blueberries or whatever it is, you're going to get a lot cleaner egg dye. So if you're going for like one color, you want to make sure that your egg dye is filtered. Otherwise, some of these we just put in with the blueberries or with the onion peels for a little bit more of a tie-dyed look. The blueberries works great. You can see the difference between the brown eggs and the blue eggs here. And most of these, we followed the same instructions. Boiling water with vinegar, and then we added the natural dye, and some things took more than others. The one that totally flopped was the spinach. We tried this one twice. Once with vinegar, and we learned that the vinegar can wash out the color from the spinach. So we did it again in really high concentration with 2 big bags of spinach and a little bit of water, and it never really took any color. So that one, we might need to do some more research to figure out how to dye green eggs with spinach. The turmeric's always an easy one. You get a really vibrant yellow with these. If you leave them in a little lighter, a little less, you get a lighter color. Overnight, you get a really vibrant yellow. We tried a red zinger tea, which gave us kind of a tie-dye brown color look. Wasn't that impressive. The black bean dye I love. These are these beautiful, really different shades of gray. Some eggs took it differently. The brown and the white both took it, but the white definitely has a more gray color to it. And for this, we just made black beans in the Instapot and then used the runoff water. We put in more water than we needed to. Used the rest of the water to make a black bean egg dye. The red beets are gorgeous. They really give your white eggs a look like a pretty dark brown egg, but they have that purpley pink tint on them as well. Hibiscus tea kind of gave us a light green. I would say these kind of look almost like the olive egger eggs that we love. So those turned out pretty fun. And celery seed, I was actually surprised, gave us this really beautiful kind of yellowy taupey green. The activated charcoal might be my favorite, but I am a sucker for a black egg. It's just so beautiful, especially against all the other bright colors. So we had a 1/3 cup of activated charcoal in with 3 cups of water and a little vinegar, and those ones turned out awesome. Now our carrots, we weren't getting much orange from, so we added cayenne. We read you can also use cayenne, and they were kind of a similar color profile. So we mixed them together, the carrots and the cayenne, and got a really pretty orange color. Coffee turned out beautifully. These are really nice, deep, dark brown. And for that, we just boiled coffee and then reduced it on the oven to get it more concentrated. Now, avocado pits are commonly used for dyeing fabrics. These really didn't give us much. The eggs have a little bit of a brownish tint, but they don't look much different than when we put them in. Next, we did red onion peels. And for these, we wrapped the eggs in red onion peels, put a rubber band around it, and then soaked them in this dye. And these just turned out so beautifully. They've got a little bit of that tie-dye, that really deep color. The browns and the white eggs both took about the same, and they have a lot of variation. So that might be my favorite, besides the activated charcoal. Orange peels, I'd say was kind of a flop. It has a little bit of a tint to it, kind of a grayish yellow tint, but nothing that exciting. We tried pomegranate juice, and these turned out interesting. They're a little mottled, but it has a neat dark purple tint to it. Some of them have much darker, some of them didn't take much at all. And then the black tea are also pretty. It's kind of a greenish yellow color, and that's just from soaking in black tea. So these are all the natural dyes we did. You can tell when you're working with natural dyes, by the end, your hands are going to be all sorts of different colors. That's why I wore my multicolored shirt today. But these were a lot of fun, and I would definitely suggest letting some of them soak overnight. I know when I've done this in the past, after a few hours, the results aren't that impressive, but when you soak them overnight, you really get that saturation. And you can leave these dyes for a while. You can leave them in the fridge and do this over a few days. You can even experiment with leaving the eggs in for a few days and see if the color deepens. Next, we're going to talk about my favorite egg dyes to use around Easter. Now, these are not natural dyes. These are called Ukrainian Easter egg dyes. And these are mostly used for this beautiful art form where you use a warm wax pen on the egg. Oftentimes you'll blow the egg out first, and they do layers and layers of these vivid colors to come up with these beautiful painted or dyed Ukrainian eggs. This egg dye is not food safe, so for these, it's not recommended that you eat these eggs after you dye with a stronger dye, but they really are beautiful. So I get these egg packets on Etsy, or there's a few different places online if you just search Ukrainian egg dyes. They come in these simple labeled packets, and these will usually last me a few years, so you don't have to use the whole packet. Now, I also love getting the Paz egg dye from the store and saving these cups, because these are the perfect size for dyeing eggs. So oftentimes I'll just save a bunch of these to use for my Ukrainian dyes, and also save these little dippers, because there's nothing that can get an egg out of a glass like these little dippers can. So in this little packet, you want to put, I'd say like 1/4 to 1/3 how much dye is in the packet in your jar. And this dye is really intense, so make sure not to get it on your clothes and put it back in the packets when you're done. So I'm going to put the boiling water in here, enough to make sure you can cover your eggs. And again, the amounts that you use don't really matter for this. You're just going to get different saturations depending on how much you use. But the packets do tell you to add 1 1/4 cups of boiling water and 1 tablespoon white vinegar. and they want you to cool the dye before you use it. So we've already done all these other colors here that I can show you. I like to use the handy little dipper and put these eggs in one at a time, or if your jar is big enough, you can do 2 at a time. And it's always interesting to see the difference between a white egg going in and a brown egg going in. But as you can see, they're dyed very vibrantly, almost immediately after going in the egg dye. I like to leave them in for 5 to 10 minutes and really let them soak up that dye. Now, cleaning up from egg dyes is always kind of a complicated process because you have to be really careful with these strong dyes. You can pour them down the drain just fine, but sometimes we like to do projects with them before we throw them out. So I had just some white tea towels here that had gotten a little grungy. No matter how many times you wash them, they still look a little grungy. My favorite thing to do with these is dye them a darker color. The indigo works great for that we're going to show you a little later. But you can also use your natural dyes. This was the leftover beet dye from the eggs, and we dipped a tea towel that had just gotten kind of grungy looking, and look how beautiful the color is. Now you want to make sure that you soak these in water afterwards, and be careful the first few times you wash them. You don't want to wash them with your nice white shirts, because some of this dye can still come out. But it's a fun way to experiment with using natural dyes to color your textiles too. And then one other thing that's fun to do with your egg dyes before you throw them out, no matter which egg dyes you use, is to experiment with some of the folding techniques with paper towels. So take your paper towel and try folding it in different ways. We can do triangles, we can do some of the techniques we're going to learn in our shibori dyeing, and dip it in your dyes. A little bit in each color. Let's try to get some of this one. Maybe this pretty yellow. I'm gonna see if I can get, well, we'll open this. And then open them up. You've got a pretty tie-dye towel. This is interesting too because it shows you that some of the colors are made up of more than one primary color. This brick color obviously has some green in it because we're getting green on the edges. So in the past, the girls and I have done lots of paper towels because they're easy and relatively inexpensive, and hung them up to dry, and it makes a beautiful banner to decorate your Easter table. Look at this beautiful display of eggs. Some of them dyed naturally, some of them dyed with our Ukrainian egg dyes. Some of them we didn't even have to dye, and they're just this beautiful right out of the chicken. Which one are your favorite, girls?
I like the pink. I like the yellow and gold ones and the purple ones.
Those are pretty. I love this black egg next to a red egg. Those are kind of Five Mary's colors, aren't they?
Yeah.
Okay. You guys want to learn a really fun contest we do every year at Easter? All right, everybody grab whatever you think is the strongest egg. I'm going to use a red one.
I'm going to use this one.
Okay.
No, wait for me.
This is a tradition I learned from some friends who are Greek Orthodox, and this is something they do every year. But they do it with only red eggs. So you take your egg and you crack it against your friend or your neighbor, and the last egg standing with a non-cracked end is the winner. So you can do this if you have a lot of people or just a few people. Okay, Tess, let's go first. You and I, you ready? Hold it like this.
I thought you were supposed to crack it on this.
No, crack it, like hold it so the end is right like that. All right, ready? 1, 2, 3, go. Oh, Mama won that one. All right, Jay.
No.
Go head to head, let's see it.
They were hard
1,
boiled.
2, 3. Did I crack you? Okay,
I
neither of them
forgot
cracked.
they
1,
were
2,
hard-boiled.
one more time. I got you! Okay, now let's see the other end of your egg. Okay, 1, 2, 3. I think I picked the winner. Mom wins with the red egg. But that's a fun game you can do at Easter. Just make sure your eggs are hard boiled.
I thought they weren't.
All right, now we are gonna go up to Camp 5 Marys, and we actually shot this footage last summer when it was still nice and sunny out, and we're gonna learn about shibori dyeing. This is one of our favorite things to do at camp. It's a really fun activity for all ages. You take plain white cloths. We had some linen napkins here, and we've done it with cotton tea towels, and you take your indigo dye in a special process to create a dye bath. Now, in some countries, the indigo dye baths never get emptied. They have big, huge vats like swimming pools where they keep adding more indigo dye, and they'll dip things like denim to get those really blue, vibrant colors. We're gonna make a small batch in a 5-gallon bucket and show you the process to make these beautiful blue textiles. Girls ready?
Yeah.
Let's go watch. All right, so to make indigo shibori dye, you need 3 ingredients: the dried natural indigo paste, slaked lime, and iron. So first, you want to get a big 5-gallon bucket, and we've boiled a gallon of water here. So we're going to dump boiling water in to the bucket first, and then we're going to take our iron packet and dump that iron right into the water, and you're going to stir your iron. So you want to make sure that the iron is totally dissolved in the boiling water first before you add the other ingredients. You can use a stick, you can use a spoon, you can use whatever you can find. All right, so we're going to keep stirring this iron and make sure that it's all dissolved. It turns kind of a greenish brown color when you get the iron in there. And when you feel like that is all dissolved, you're gonna add the lime. Might be good to have a pair of scissors for this. Okay, so we've got the lime in there. We're gonna stir it again. And you can kind of feel the lime is a little bit thicker and chalkier. So as you're stirring, you can really feel when it's starting to dissolve in there. The color is also going to turn more of a tealy blue than the brownish green we had with the iron. Scrape your edges, make sure you're getting everything dissolved in there. The last step, once the iron and the lime is dissolved, is to put in your dried indigo paste. This bottle has some beads and rocks in it to really get that indigo to separate. So you want to shake it, kind of like a maraca, until you feel like it's all broken up in there. And it's a good idea to shake this before you start the project, but also right before you put it in, give it a really good shake. Okay, you're ready. So, as you can see in here, this is the dried indigo paste, and we're going to pour that in. So you want to make sure to keep shaking the bottle with some cold water in it so that you get all of that indigo dye off the edges of the bottle. The more dye you have in there, the darker it will be. So that bottle is pretty clear now, and we're going to stir again. after you've added all 3 ingredients to the boiling hot water, you're gonna fill the rest of your bucket with cold water. Give it another stir. And then we're gonna cover this and let it sit for 24 hours before we start our dyeing process. So after about 24 hours of letting your dye sit, you can open the top. You wanna make sure to keep it covered. And you should have a foamy layer on top that you just kind of gently move to the side with a stick or a spoon. You can pull a little of that foam off if you want, but you're always gonna have a layer on top that you just wanna gently push aside before you dye. Next, you get whatever you are going to dye. We love using these tea towels. They're actually from Walmart, and we found these are the best quality to absorb the dye. They're Cotton Mainstays white tea towels. They're about $1 each, and they work really well with indigo dyeing to stand the test of time. So you can fold your towel any way you'd like. There's a lot of different techniques for shibori dyeing. We'll have a list of the different techniques in this lesson. There's no right or wrong way to do this. You can also do an accordion-like folding technique where you go back and forth. Like that, and then again the other direction. It's also a good idea to get your towel wet before you dip it. So once you have your fold, you can dip it in water and then dip it in your indigo dye. And the ideal time is probably only about 30 seconds, but the longer you leave it, the more saturation you're gonna get, and the quicker you do it, the less saturation. So we're gonna do a very simple dye here, and I'm just going to dye about half of it. Now, you don't want to get oxygen in your dye, so you think that you're wasting dye by letting this really soak up, but you don't want to wring it out back in your dye bath because that introduces more oxygen, which will shorten the life of your dye. So when we pull this out, you can see that the indigo is actually a green color, and right before our eyes, as we watch it, it oxidizes in the air and will turn blue. So you can see the thin areas already turning blue, and the really saturated thick areas that are green are slowly, actually pretty quickly, turning blue. You can fold it in half again, in half again, and keep going until you can't fold it anymore. And a part of shibori dyeing that we love is the term wabi-sabi. And that means it is what it is. No matter what happens, that's the way it was supposed to come out. So don't worry about messing up. There's no mess ups in this. However it comes out of this dye bath is the way it was supposed to be. So we're gonna dip each corner in. And again, you can do it for as long as you want. I'm just gonna do a quick dip on each corner so we can really see the green when we undo this one. All right, wabi-sabi. So pretty. You can see that one took us about 10 seconds to fold and 10 seconds to dip, and it is perfect. So it's a good idea to have a lot of rubber bands if you want to do the spinning technique. And make sure they're new rubber bands because they're not going to snap as easily. So I like to start in the middle. Just grab a piece and spin it around until you've got a spiral. You can do the whole thing, or you can just kind of do a part of it. And when you've got your spiral, you want to rubber band it as tight as you can and try to stay in one line. And then I like to do a few of them on that line, on that spiral. So you've got multiple lines on each spiral. And again, the tighter you do it, the more white you're gonna have. And like I said, it's nice to start one on the corner so that it doesn't look like all of your spirals are just in the middle. So start on the edge and spin that one around. Easy if you put it down on the table and start it flat to get that spiral going. Okay, we'll call this the last one. So once you feel satisfied with your spiral towel, you're gonna dip it in plain cold water. Just a quick dip, wring it out, and that just gets your material damp so it'll absorb the dye more easily. You don't have to do this step, but it is recommended. You wanna clear a spot in your dye. You see it has this blue tint on the top and it's really green underneath. You might want to wear gloves because the dye will stain your hand, but I'm usually too impatient to put gloves on. And you just kind of want to dip it and let it sit. You don't really need to have a lot of movement. You just want to make sure that it's all under the dye, and again, let it sit for as long as you feel like you want it to be saturated. Okay. That was about 30 seconds. So we're going to take it out. And the easiest way to take these rubber bands off is going to be to snip them so that they just kind of pop off. It's a little more difficult if you take them off by hand. So we're going to open our tie-dye one. So this is a fun and easy one. I just folded it all the way across and then folded it in half, then put rubber bands all along it. I put a few rubber bands and did them as tight as I could, so hopefully it'll give us nice white lines all along. So we're going to dip this whole thing in. Nice lines. So when you're working with your dye, it's a good idea to keep it in the shade so that it's not oxidizing too much on top. And after you give it that stir, definitely let it settle for about 10 minutes. You want all that sediment and the iron to settle to the bottom and really work just in the top of your dye. So the less you stir or disturb your dye batch, the better results you're gonna get. It's also a good idea to let them dry in the shade. Indigo is a really strong dye that hardly even comes out in the wash, but when it's wet, it's susceptible to fading in the sun. So try to find a shady spot where you can hang them up until they're fully dry. Thanks for joining us, Ranch School.
Bye, Ranch School.
We hope this lesson inspired you to find some natural dyes and create things like towels for your kitchen, or eggs around Easter time, or even dyeing your clothes. Just have fun with it. Thanks for watching.